Welcome back to That's Life with John Carver. This is episode number 268. I called this episode The Means of Their Propulsion. John, you come up with some of these crazy titles you might be thinking. Well, hang in there with me for just a minute. So first of all, what's the definition of propulsion? Well, one definition is the act of driving or pushing forward. The act of driving or pushing forward. So when you understand a little bit about how something or someone pushes forward, it's a whole lot easier to identify the characteristics of that thing or that person. Hang in there with me for just a few minutes. David Hambling, who's a technology expert, wrote one time, he says a jet engine, the simplest way to describe a jet engine is that it sucks in air and compresses air. Now, there's a whole lot more bells and whistles to that, of course, but that's the gist of it in his words, sucking in and compressing air. Now, years ago, decades ago, there was a jet called the SR-71 Blackbird that would travel up to 2,100 miles an hour or 3,500 kilometers per hour, which is 4 times the speed of a commercial jet. Now, this reconnaissance jet was able to take photographs that were 72 miles wide. Whoa. So they're obviously very high in the sky, and we're able to take those kinds of photographs for surveillance and spying. But what does that have to do with you? What does that have to do with me? Well, again, once you understand how and why people do what they do, you can then understand them a lot better. Let me share a few examples with you. There's some people who push themselves so intensely that it's really difficult to understand them because they're like a steam engine in a china shop, if you will. Their means of propulsion seems to be a mystery until you learn about their past. In many cases, people who are so focused on their work, it comes from some childhood challenges, and some of them, maybe they're born into poverty and they don't want to go back to that poverty state or that socioeconomic situation. So they're afraid of going back to having nothing. Or they might be raised in a family where the parent or parents think little of them. They don't talk well about them. They say that you're not good enough. So they spend their entire life trying to prove to their family and the world that in fact they're good enough. So that propulsion, that pushes them to be insanely aggressive in everything that they do. And then there's some people who lash out at other people much of the time. They seem to think that their words aren't going to impact other people in their lives. Years ago, I heard a quote by John Maxwell. He said that hurting people hurt people. Again, hurting people hurt people. If you stop and think about that for just a minute, not everybody who's hurting hurts people, but when you see people hurting other people, you might want to think about if in fact they're hurting themselves and they lash out in pain as a result of, they lash out in anger as a result of their pain. So I was looking at this in a lot of people's lives that I've had dealings with over the years, and some of these people see through a lens of pain. Now, there's lots of people, I don't know the exact number, but there's lots of people who have a means of propulsion that's based on the details and the attentions of other people without doing the homework and the research behind the people that they're following. Does that make any sense? That's a serious mistake. That is to follow people just because, without doing any homework or research on what the why is behind what the people are doing consistently. What's going on behind the scenes. But then there's other people who stay awake at night trying to make a difference in the world. They worry about everybody on the planet. They worry about making the world a better place. And their propulsion, their means of propulsion is love. So you go from the angry people and the hurt people to people that are full of love, that really want to make a difference in other people's lives. So the challenge is obvious. Unless you and the late Stephen Covey, as he said, seek first to understand, then to be understood. So when you do that consistently, it's a little easier to understand why people do what they do. Again, seek first to understand, then be understood. So unless you understand the people in your life, or at least try to understand the people in your life, it's going to be really, really hard to figure out why people are doing what they're doing. So once you discover your means of propulsion, really, if you really narrow down to why you're doing what you're doing, and discover what other people are doing and why they're doing it, you'll see life so differently. It's worked for me for decades. You'll see life so differently than you ever did in the past. My name is John Carver. Thanks for watching.